The door to La Renaissance, Manhattan's crown jewel of fine dining, swung open with a harsh metallic clang, shattering the delicate hum of conversation and the soft clinking of crystal glasses, for men in grimy maintenance overalls entered with an unsettling precision, their eyes scanning the room with a mixture of calculation and impatience. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. The polished marble floors reflected the chandelier light like scattered stars, and even the soft strains of the live pianist seemed to vanish. The leader, a burly man with a scar slicing across his cheek, stepped forward, his voice slicing through the elegance of the room. "Quiet, everyone. Phones on the table." Now, each word landed like a hammer blow, demanding obedience, and in an instant, the wealthy patrons realized they were no longer in a sanctuary of luxury but trapped inside a carefully orchestrated nightmare. Victoria Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries and one of the country's most powerful women, felt the cold steel of a gun pressed firmly against her back. She had been enjoying a rare evening of solitude, savoring the subtle complexities of a delicately prepared duck breast. The soft lighting of her favorite corner table offering the illusion of peace. In a single, terrifying second, that peace evaporated. The scarred leader leaned close, letting the acrid tang of leather and danger mingle with the scent of truffle and roasted duck. "Transfer $50 million immediately. Or we start with your friends," he whispered, slow and deliberate, letting the threat hang in the air like a guillotine poised for descent. Patrons froze mid-bite. Waiters' trays teetered on the edge, and the background music became a ghostly echo. But, at the adjacent table, Daniel Reeves, just 15, dressed in a simple school uniform, continued chewing his hamburger as if none of this applied to him. His backpack, worn at the edges, lay casually on the floor. Yet something about the way he sat commanded attention. His posture was rigid but natural, eyes scanning every corner, every reflection, every shadow, absorbing detail with a meticulousness that belied his age. The intruder's confident swagger faltered. Even the most hardened among them sensed a ripple of unease. This boy was not ordinary, "Hey kid." One of the robbers barked, pointing a gun toward Daniel's cell phone. "Are you deaf?" Daniel lifted his gaze slowly, unblinking, his calm radiating a quiet authority that made the room hold its breath. "I'm listening," he said, voice measured, deliberate, carrying a weight that seemed impossible for someone his age. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, a simple act executed with meticulous care. As if each movement were premeditated, a ritual of control in the midst of chaos. The restaurant seemed suspended in time. A waiter froze mid-step, a champagne flute teetered, and Victoria, heart pounding, realized that the boy was far from ordinary. He wasn't panicked. He was analyzing, calculating, and mapping every exit, every reflection, every position of threat in the room. Already, in ways none could see, he was 3 steps ahead. The robbers hesitated. Confidence gave way to a flicker of doubt, tiny cracks forming in their armor as they realized that the boy radiated something they couldn't name, a quiet, dangerous mastery over the environment. Victoria's pulse thundered in her ears, yet her eyes remained locked on him. She was trying to reconcile the ordinary his worn uniform, scuffed shoes, and simple backpack with the extraordinary the precision, the calm calculation, the sense that this boy was silently orchestrating the chaos around him. Each detail he observed, each subtle movement he made, hinted at training far beyond his years. It was terrifying and mesmerizing all at once. Daniel's eyes briefly met Victoria's, calm and assessing, as if noting her reactions, her fear, her thoughts. He wasn't just observing the room, he was reading people, analyzing their weaknesses, mentally charting escape routes and strategic moves. Even the robbers felt it, an invisible weight pressing against them, forcing hesitation where they expected compliance. The room was no longer just a restaurant. It had become a battlefield, and Daniel Reeves, sitting quietly with his half-eaten hamburger, was the unseen general. In that moment, Victoria understood, with a shiver that ran from her spine to her skull, that the child she had dismissed as ordinary was anything but. He was a storm contained in a calm shell, and everyone present, patrons, staff, and criminals alike, had unknowingly become players in a game that they didn't yet comprehend. Time stretched. Each second thickened with tension, the air buzzing with the fragile balance between threat and control. Daniel's gaze swept the room again, noting the chandeliers, the fire extinguishers, the angles of the tables, the position of each assailant. There was no fear, no hesitation, only observation and silent calculation. Victoria felt a creeping, chilling realization. This boy was already in command. Whatever unfolded next, the outcome would be determined not by the men with guns, but by the quiet, invisible authority of the one who seemed too young, too ordinary, and yet utterly, terrifyingly extraordinary. And for anyone paying attention, it was already clear Daniel Reeves was no ordinary teenager. The leader's cruel sneer faltered for a fraction of a second as Daniel calmly surveyed the room. "Sir," the boy said, voice eerily steady, "you have approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the police arrive." The words hit like ice water, freezing the man mid. The intruder's eyes widened in disbelief. How could a 15-year-old know this? Daniel's gaze didn't waver. It was precise, measured, full of quiet authority. He continued, almost conversationally, "Your forced entry triggered the silent alarm." The manager discreetly tapped his watch, 3 times standard panic code. "I learned this from the security manuals my father used to bring home." The weight of his words hung in the air. A silent gauntlet thrown. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Not Victoria, not the robbers, not even the other diners who had stopped breathing without realizing it. The room was taut with tension, a living wire of danger and anticipation. Victoria's mind raced. She had encountered formidable adversaries before, boardroom sharks and ruthless corporate rivals, but none had prepared her for this. A child with the mind of a tactician, the poise of a seasoned operative, and the uncanny ability to read situations with a clarity that most adults spent decades learning. Her eyes discreetly scanned Daniel as he stood, a subtle shift of his shoulders and a deliberate blink communicating more than words ever could. Even the robbers felt a crack of unease. The boy's calm defied the chaos he sat amid. Yet every movement he made radiated a disciplined, calculated rhythm, precisely the kind of training that transformed a teenager into an agent of calculated intervention. The leader attempted to regain control, his cruel laugh echoing off the ornate walls. "Look, we have a genius here. A suburban kid who thinks he's smart, but his bravado was fragile." Doubt crept in, his voice betraying the first tremors of fear. He turned to Victoria, shaking a gun at her. "Transfer the money now, or the first shot will be his head." Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Then, something extraordinary happened. Daniel's eyes flicked to the chandelier above the leader, then to the fire extinguisher on the wall, then back to her. In that silent exchange, a plan was communicated without a single word. It was a language of precision, of instinct, of strategy taught at the cost of unimaginable discipline. Victoria realized she had not just stumbled upon a courageous boy, she had discovered a prodigy of military foresight and calculated action. Daniel's movements were flawless. With a sudden fluid motion, he kicked the table leg, just enough to send the leader's plate flying into his face. Chaos erupted. Patrons ducked, glasses shattered, and the leader reeled, blinded momentarily by hot sauce. Daniel didn't pause. A chair was grabbed and hurled toward the chandelier, glass and crystal raining down like deadly confetti. "Back door now," he commanded, his tone crisp, authoritative. Victoria obeyed instinctively. For the first time, she realized she was witnessing not a child in danger, but a strategist controlling the battlefield. The room itself bending to his design. The other assailants scrambled. Weapons now obstacles rather than threats. Daniel's movements were precise. Block, parry, counterattack, every strike deliberate. Calculated at the pressure points his father had drilled into him over years of intense, covert training. The burly intruder collapsed, his arm twisted unnaturally, and Daniel retreated strategically, maintaining distance. "You guys picked the wrong restaurant," he said, calm, almost polite. "And you definitely picked the wrong person to threaten the leader." Still reeling, finally recognized the truth. The boy was no ordinary witness. no frightened teenager. He was a force, meticulously trained and terrifyingly efficient. Victoria, now pressed against the kitchen wall, watched in awe and terror. The quiet boy she had dismissed as a simple diner was orchestrating the outcome of an armed robbery with the skill of a seasoned commander. Every observation, every calculated move, every moment of composure screamed one undeniable fact. Daniel Reeves was not just surviving this encounter, he was controlling it entirely, and in that moment, Victoria understood that the boy's presence here was no accident. The unfolding scene was only the beginning of a carefully plotted plan, a demonstration of skill honed over years under the guidance of a man whose legacy was both deadly and brilliant. The leader, still wiping the remnants of hot sauce from his face, finally grasped the horrifying reality before him. His arrogance, once unshakable, crumbled under Daniel's precise calm. Who are you?" he stammered, voice trembling. But Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the entrance, where faint, wailing sirens now hinted at imminent backup. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Every second accounted for, every move calculated with the cold precision of a general. Victoria, pressed against the kitchen wall, could hardly breathe, her mind spinning. She had always dealt with power brokers, corporate espionage, and boardroom games, but nothing had prepared her for this 15-year-old boy orchestrating a return tactical scenario that could rival trained operatives. Daniel's composure was terrifying. He moved with a fluidity that suggested years of silent preparation, each step deliberate, each motion a signal in a larger plan. Victoria noticed the subtle communications, the tilt of his head, the deliberate blink, the barely perceptible gestures toward objects in the room. Every piece of furniture, every exit, every distraction became part of a synchronized strategy. She realized, with growing awe, that this was no impulsive act of bravery. Daniel was executing a carefully orchestrated plan, one designed to neutralize the threat efficiently and minimize casualties, yet maximize control. Even the robbers, once the apex of danger in the room, had become unwitting pawns in his game. Their fear palpable as they realized their every move was anticipated. Then, Daniel's calm voice cut through the tension once more, almost conversational in its clarity. "Drop your weapons. There's still time to avoid regret." The words were not a threat. They were a command backed by unspoken authority, one earned through years of disciplined training and personal loss. The leader hesitated, caught between disbelief and fear, and for the first time, the scales of control shifted entirely. Victoria watched, heart hammering, as Daniel moved again, quick, precise, unhesitant. A fire extinguisher was seized, a distraction created, chaos leveraged to perfection. The other robbers flailed, uncoordinated, their attempts to regain dominance falling apart against a force they could not comprehend. Victoria's mind raced as she followed every move. This boy, seemingly ordinary, had orchestrated every step of this encounter with tactical brilliance. She realized that Daniel was more than a protector. He was the architect of the entire scene, a mind trained to anticipate, manipulate, and neutralize threats before they could escalate. Each breath he took, each calculated motion, spoke volumes of the man who had trained him. General Marcus Reeves. The general's legacy, his discipline, and his ruthless commitment to strategy lived on in Daniel, unfolding in real time before her very eyes. And in that moment, Victoria understood a terrifying truth. This boy was not just defending lives, he was executing a blueprint of vengeance, precision, and justice, far beyond his years. By the time the police sirens grew louder and the first patrol cars were glimpsed through the windows, the room had transformed. Panic, fear, and chaos now danced around a single calm-centered Daniel Reeves. Victoria, still reeling, realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. A 15-year-old boy turning the tide of danger, controlling a room, a situation, and potentially the future, all with the cold, calculated efficiency of a seasoned general. And as Daniel issued one final commanding instruction to the robbers, it became clear this was only the beginning, the first act of a plan that would ripple far beyond the walls of this restaurant. reaching into every corner of the empire his father had once battled to protect. The other three assailants reacted, in a mix of panic and disbelief, their weapons now a liability rather than an advantage. Daniel, however, didn't flinch. His movements were precise, almost robotic, a silent dance of tactical efficiency learned under the watchful eye of his late father. With a swift motion, he grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall and sprayed a blinding cloud of foam into the nearest shooter's face. The man coughed, staggered, and flailed blindly, momentarily incapacitated. "Damn kid." Another roared, lunging forward, but Daniel was already 2 steps ahead, blocking, parrying, and redirecting each assault with a mastery that no ordinary 15-year-old could possess. Every punch, every grab, every move was calculated, aimed at neutralizing threats with minimal harm. Victoria, now behind the safety of the kitchen's reinforced door, could barely comprehend the scene. The boy she had assumed was an ordinary teenager was orchestrating a tactical masterpiece in real time. Chairs flew, chandeliers shattered, and the room descended into chaos. But amid the mayhem, Daniel maintained a terrifying calm, a centered precision that made him almost untouchable. His eyes scanned the room constantly, taking in every detail, every possible escape route, every weak point in the robbers' coordination. It was as if he could see the future a few seconds ahead, predicting and controlling outcomes before the assailants even realized what was happening. The elegant hum of La Renaissance had transformed into a battlefield, and Daniel Reeves was clearly the commanding general. Then, almost imperceptibly, he signaled to Victoria. His glance flicked to the chandelier above the leader, then to the fire extinguisher on the wall, and back to her. It was silent communication, a plan conveyed without words. Victoria understood instantly she needed to move now. Her hands shook, but she obeyed, slipping quietly toward the back exit, as instructed. Daniel continued his precise maneuvers, using every object in the room as both a shield and a weapon. A man with a scar, the leader of the robbers, wiped hot sauce from his eyes in disbelief, realizing too late that he had underestimated not just a boy, but a carefully trained operative with the mind of a general and the soul of a son seeking justice. The room seemed to slow around Victoria as she watched. Each action Daniel took was deliberate, yet fluid, almost graceful, a deadly ballet of strategy and self-control. His training, his grief, and his unbreakable resolve fused into one unstoppable force. And yet, beneath the calculated precision, there was emotion. Each move carried the memory of his father, the legacy of General Marcus Reeves, the silent promise that justice would be served for those who could not defend themselves. Victoria's heart pounded, not just with fear for her own safety, but with awe at the magnitude of what she was witnessing. A 15-year-old boy turning despair and tragedy into a force powerful enough to neutralize multiple armed assailants in one of the city's most luxurious restaurants. By the time the police sirens grew louder, Daniel had already assessed every threat, controlled the chaos, and created a clear path for Victoria to escape. Every second had been calculated, every action pre-planned, and yet it had all appeared spontaneous, as if a boy of 15 could instinctively anticipate and outmaneuver adults trained for violence. Victoria realized with a chill that this was not mere courage or luck. This was genius forged through years of grief, training, and strategic mentorship. Daniel Reeves wasn't just defending himself or others. He was executing a full-scale operation, and the consequences of his actions would echo far beyond the walls of La Renaissance. The leader of the robbers, still wiping sauce and shattered glass from his face, finally realized the chilling truth. This wasn't a normal teenage boy. They were facing someone who moved with the precision of a trained operative. Daniel Reeves' eyes, calm yet unyielding, scanned the room like a hawk, taking in every detail: the positions of the assailants, the potential exits, even the subtle gestures of the hostages. Each movement was deliberate, each glance a silent command, each pause a tactical calculation. Victoria, huddled behind the kitchen door, could hardly believe what she was seeing. The boy she had assumed was an ordinary 15-year-old from a modest school suddenly seemed like a phantom, controlling the chaos with an invisible grip. Every step and action precise and purposeful. Daniel's mastery of the environment became painfully evident. A chair was kicked, not recklessly, but aimed to unbalance the leader, sending him stumbling into shards of glass that crunched beneath his boots. The chandelier above shivered as he tossed a heavy object, creating a cascade of crystal that distracted and disoriented. He sprayed the fire extinguisher with pinpoint accuracy, turning the room into a temporary fog of confusion that gave him breathing space. But beyond the physical actions, there was an almost imperceptible psychological warfare at play. His calm demeanor unnerved the robbers, shaking their confidence. They were experienced criminals, but facing Daniel's cold, methodical control of the situation made them hesitate, giving Victoria and the other hostages a lifeline to safety. Every move carried the weight of a lifetime of preparation, though he was only 15. Memories of his father's teachings, the meticulous military drills, the tactical simulations in their backyard, the hours spent decoding strategies and learning how to anticipate human behavior were etched into Daniel's very being. He didn't act out of fear or impulse. He acted with intent, as if every step had been rehearsed for this exact moment. Victoria, a seasoned CEO who had built a billion-dollar empire by reading people and situations, recognized the unmistakable signs of advanced training, of someone who had been molded to turn chaos into advantage. And yet, beneath the strategy and precision, there was a human core, a boy driven by loss, by justice for a father who had been killed for uncovering corruption, by the desire to protect those around him. Daniel's silent communication with Victoria was another layer of brilliance. One glance, one subtle gesture, conveyed the path to safety. He created a corridor of escape with minimal words, guiding her instinctively while simultaneously keeping the assailants disoriented. Each step he took was calculated, every motion efficient and economical, blending the skills of a soldier with the cunning of a strategist. Even as sirens blared in the distance, signaling the arrival of the police, Daniel remained a calm eye in the storm. The robbers, once brash and confident, were now reduced to fumbling. Desperate men trying to make sense of a situation they could neither dominate nor control. Victoria's OA mixed with fear as she watched. She realized, with a chill running down her spine, that this boy wasn't just saving lives, he was executing a tactical symphony. A perfectly timed and orchestrated response to a life-threatening crisis. He had transformed what could have been a massacre into a meticulously controlled operation, combining courage, intelligence, and a deeply ingrained sense of justice. The boy who had seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, had turned into an unstoppable force, and in that tense, adrenaline-charged moment, Victoria understood something terrifying yet undeniable. Daniel Reeves was no longer just a teenage boy, he was a prodigy of strategy, a master of execution, and a rising force whose influence would extend far beyond the walls of La Renaissance. The leader of the robbers, his confidence now crumbling like fragile glass, froze as he realized they had underestimated their target. Daniel Reeves, just a 15-year-old boy in appearance, was orchestrating every movement in the room with the precision of a seasoned military strategist. His calm, measured breathing and unshakable gaze contrasted sharply with the chaos around him, screaming, panicking, and desperate men who had thought themselves in control. The air was thick with tension. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the faint aroma of burnt sauce from the toppled dishes, while shattered glass glittered on the marble floor like a dangerous mosaic. Every second seemed to stretch as Daniel assessed the room, mentally mapping exits, hostages, and aggressors with the acuity of someone who had been trained for years to anticipate every threat. Victoria, crouched near the kitchen doorway, felt her heart pound in her chest. She had faced boardroom showdowns, corporate betrayals, and high-stakes negotiations, but nothing had prepared her for this kind of orchestrated, real-time brilliance. Her mind raced. How can someone so young be so precise, so fearless? Daniel's movements were fluid, calculated, almost hypnotic. One moment he was seated, quietly observing, his expression unreadable. The next, he became an unstoppable force. He kicked the chair with exact precision into the chandelier, shattering crystals that rained down with deadly grace, blinding and disorienting the robbers. He swept across the room, grabbing a fire extinguisher and spraying a dense cloud of foam, turning the room into a haze that masked his next calculated steps. Every action was deliberate. Neutralize the threat, protect the hostages, and maintain control of the situation. Victoria's pulse raced as she realized that Daniel was not just reacting, he was commanding the room, turning every potential danger into an advantage, every attack into a setup for the next move. If this boy can do this under pressure, what else is he capable of? She thought, awe and fear mingling in her chest. In that moment, Victoria understood the full magnitude of Daniel's training. Flashbacks of General Marcus Reeves teaching his son tactical maneuvers, psychological manipulation, and battlefield strategies surged in her mind. Each lesson had been etched into Daniel's being, transforming him into an operator who could remain calm under extreme pressure and respond with lethal efficiency when needed. His small frame belied the mental and physical discipline honed over years of meticulous preparation. Every subtle shift in posture, every glance. Victoria's heart pounded as she observed the seamless execution. Her mind raced, recognizing the patterns, the precision, and the foresight embedded in every one of Daniel's moves. He wasn't merely surviving, he was commanding, directing, and executing a tactical operation that would put seasoned adults to shame. The contrast between the terrified, panicked robbers and the calm, decisive Daniel was staggering. This boy, he is not just a survivor. He is a strategist, a tactician, a force shaped by the legacy of a general. She realized, her awe mingling with an instinctive fear for what might come next. She now understood that Daniel Reeves wasn't just protecting himself or the hostages, he was demonstrating the culmination of years of preparation, grief, and purpose, a purpose that went far beyond this single night and had the power to reshape lives, legacies, and empires alike. As Daniel directed Victoria toward safety, his eyes flicked toward the restaurant entrance, calculating the exact moment the authorities would arrive. Every second of delay, every misstep by the robbers, only reinforced the boy's meticulous planning and unmatched tactical foresight. Victoria could only watch, her mind whirling with a mixture of terror, admiration, and disbelief. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a live demonstration of strategy, courage, and precision at the hands of someone who had been forged by tragedy and trained for vengeance. And, as the first uniformed officers entered the restaurant, Daniel's calm, almost serene expression didn't waver for a moment, leaving everyone including Victoria utterly stunned by the force of his presence and the clarity of his purpose. The police officers moved in cautiously, their presence instantly shifting the dynamics of the restaurant. The robbers, already disoriented and blinded by Daniel's ingenious tactics, now faced the additional pressure of armed law enforcement closing in. Yet Daniel Reeves remained unnervingly calm, his eyes scanning every corner, every potential threat, and every possible escape route. It was as if he had rehearsed this exact scenario 1,000 times, and now he was flawlessly executing the plan his father had instilled in him. Victoria Ashford, still behind the counter, could barely process what she was witnessing. Her mind, trained in corporate strategy and high-stakes negotiations, was struggling to comprehend the sheer precision and confidence of a 15-year-old boy controlling a room filled with panic, fear, and danger. Every gesture Daniel made was intentional, a silent command to Victoria and an unspoken warning to the robbers. His movements were not just tactical, they were poetic. A deadly dance choreographed with military precision, born from years of rigorous training and relentless discipline. The leader of the robbers, now thoroughly defeated and humiliated, stared at Daniel with a mix of fear and disbelief. How could a child, someone so young and seemingly powerless, orchestrate the downfall of 4 armed men with such flawless efficiency? Victoria, her hands still trembling, realized with mounting horror that Daniel was no ordinary teenager. He was a master strategist, a living embodiment of the legacy left by General Marcus Reeves, whose meticulous planning and military foresight had prepared his son for a moment exactly like this. Daniel's calm, commanding presence contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. His composure radiating authority and control that belied his age. Each of his movements, each calculated decision, reinforced a terrifying realization. This boy had been trained not merely to survive, but to dominate and protect, with the precision of a seasoned operative. Victoria's admiration was tinged with fear. If this was the product of a grieving father's legacy, what else was Daniel capable of beyond these walls? As the officers began taking control of the situation, Daniel continued guiding Victoria towards safety with subtle gestures. His eyes constantly assessing and recalculating. He moved with an efficiency that left no room for error, ensuring that neither she nor the other innocent diners were harmed. His tactical awareness, honed over years under his father's watchful eye, was now on full display, proving that every lesson, every discipline, and every painstaking hour of training had been purposefully designed for this very moment. Victoria's mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the vulnerable-looking boy she had first seen eating a hamburger with the unstoppable force of strategy, courage, and intelligence now moving beside her. She realized that Daniel's true power did not come from physical strength or intimidation, came from mastery of knowledge, anticipation of threats, and a deep understanding of human behavior that allowed him to manipulate and control a room filled with fear, panic, and violence. The sirens outside grew louder, signaling that backup had arrived, yet Daniel's focus never wavered. He moved Victoria calmly, silently, and deliberately, always maintaining situational awareness while keeping the robbers incapacitated and the hostages safe. Every detail, from the angle of his gaze to the placement of his hands, demonstrated an unparalleled level of expertise and control. It was no longer simply a robbery being thwarted, it had become a masterclass in strategy, tactical execution, and psychological dominance, all performed by a boy whose mind was years ahead of his peers. Victoria, watching from her vantage point, felt a mixture of awe, fear, and a dawning comprehension. This was not just a teenager handling a dangerous situation, this was a young prodigy, a calculated force of justice, and the living continuation of a military legacy meticulously designed to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast even the most formidable of opponents. By the time the last robber was handcuffed and restrained, Daniel's calm composure never faltered. The officers, momentarily stunned by the precise execution of events they had just witnessed, could barely believe that the orchestrator of the entire operation was a mere 15-year-old boy. Victoria, now standing safely behind the protective barricade of the kitchen, finally exhaled, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had witnessed something extraordinary, an act of courage, intellect, and strategy so meticulously executed that it bordered on genius. And in that moment, she realized that Daniel Reeves was no ordinary hero. He was a force of reckoning, a child forged by grief and trained with precision, whose actions that night would forever change the fates of everyone in the room and, possibly, the entire city. 3 hours later, Victoria Ashford sat in the police station, still shaken, her hands trembling slightly as she signed the final statements. The adrenaline from the restaurant incident had barely subsided, yet her mind raced relentlessly, trying to piece together what had just transpired. Detective Reynolds, a seasoned investigator with decades of experience handling high-stakes crimes, closed the folder with a sigh of relief. "Ms. Ashford, you were incredibly lucky," he said, a note of admiration in his voice. A 15-year-old boy acted like a trained operative in a real-life crisis. "I've seen professionals falter under less pressure." Victoria forced a tight-lipped smile, but her mind was already working at full speed, racing through every subtle movement. Every calculated action Daniel had executed with uncanny precision. This was no luck. This was meticulous planning, intelligence, and training distilled into one human being, an anomaly of strategy and courage. As she walked out of the back door, Victoria noticed a sleek black limousine waiting for her. Inside stood James Peterson, a private attorney known for handling high-profile corporate cases with discretion and expertise. His presence was both reassuring and ominous. I need you to investigate everything about Daniel Reeves, Victoria instructed, her voice low but firm, betraying a mix of fear and urgency. His family, school, history, even the smallest habits, everything. I want a complete dossier. Peterson nodded, handing her a tablet with preliminary files already compiled. Victoria scrolled through the details, her blood running cold. General Marcos Reeves, Daniel's father, had died under mysterious circumstances 3 months ago. Officially, a heart attack. But the deeper she delved, the more she realized the strings connected directly to DEFCON Industries, her own empire's largest defense contractor partner. Her empire, built on decades of careful strategy and ruthless ambition, now felt fragile, vulnerable, and exposed to the precise reckoning orchestrated by a boy she had underestimated. Victoria's thoughts were interrupted by a subtle but chilling realization. Daniel was not acting impulsively or emotionally. Every move, every word, and every action had been calculated with military-level precision. He was not only honoring his father's legacy, but also executing a sophisticated operation designed to expose corruption, punish wrongdoers, and reclaim justice in a world where power often silenced truth. As Victoria contemplated the gravity of her situation, a message appeared on her phone from an unknown number. "Hello, Ms. Ashford. Thank you for not mentioning our agreement to the police. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Coffee Corner on 5th Avenue. We need to talk about the future of DEFCON." Her heart skipped a beat. The boy had her number. He knew her movements. He was always 3 steps ahead. Fear mingled with admiration as Victoria realized that the teenager she had initially dismissed as a harmless bystander was, in fact, a master strategist, a calculated force ready to execute justice with unerring precision. The next day, at exactly 3 p.m., Victoria Ashford arrived at the Coffee Corner on 5th Avenue. Carefully disguising herself with oversized sunglasses and a scarf pulled high to shield her face, every step she took was calculated, yet a gnawing anxiety clung to her. The bustling street, the clinking of coffee cups, the casual chatter of strangers, it all seemed almost surreal against the storm of tension swirling in her mind. She scanned the cafe, searching for any hint of the boy she had underestimated so profoundly. And there he was. Daniel Reeves entered quietly, school backpack slung over his shoulder. Crumpled uniform, worn sneakers, the very picture of a regular suburban teenager, but those eyes were nothing short of commanding. They radiated a calculating coldness, a maturity far beyond his 15 years, and a confidence that sent shivers down Victoria's spine. He approached and sat without asking. His calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos he had orchestrated just hours earlier. Daniel ordered a hot chocolate with an almost casual air, as though they were discussing a school assignment, rather than the unraveling of a multi-billion-dollar empire. He began speaking softly, but with an unshakable authority that demanded attention. "You know, my dad used to take me fishing every Sunday," he said, stirring the drink slowly, methodically. "He always said, patience is a strategist's greatest weapon. Wait for the fish to bite, son, never force it." Victoria remained silent, her jaw-tight eyes darting between the boy and her own trembling hands. The weight of the past 3 months, the lies, the corruption, the murder of a man she had underestimated pressed on her chest like a vice. She realized in that moment that she was not negotiating with a child. She was facing a mind honed by decades of military strategy, forensic training, and relentless preparation, all distilled into one seemingly ordinary teenager whose father had anticipated the very day Victoria now lived in fear of. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice deliberate, each word measured. "In the last 3 years, I've created 47 false identities to infiltrate shell companies. I tracked every financial transfer through 12 tax havens. I recorded 89 hours of conversations that expose corruption, bribery, and murder. You might think you're untouchable, but everything you've built, every secret you've hidden, has been meticulously documented. I know what you did to my father, and now, justice will be served not by the law, but by the strategy he taught me. You have a choice, Ms. Ashford. And the consequences of your decision will ripple far beyond this cafe. Victoria's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, knuckles white, as the enormity of her vulnerability became undeniable. She was alone, powerless, and confronted by a force she could not intimidate, bribe, or manipulate. The boy she had dismissed as insignificant had become the architect of her reckoning, and every calculated move he had made was pushing her toward the only path left: restitution, exposure, and the collapse of the empire she had so carefully built on deception and blood. Victoria's mind raced as Daniel's words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. She could feel the weight of every secret, every hidden transaction, every life manipulated or destroyed, pressing down on her. The cafe, once a place of casual comfort, now felt like a courtroom and battlefield combined. With Daniel Reeves as the silent judge and executioner, he calmly opened his backpack, sliding out a thin laptop, its screen illuminating his determined expression. Without a single word, he turned it toward Victoria. The screen displayed an investigative blog he had meticulously curated every piece of evidence. Every document, every recorded conversation, neatly catalogued, ready for public exposure. Kenneth Morrison, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who had served under Daniel's father in Iraq, sat quietly beside him, his gaze steady, his presence a silent reinforcement of the gravity of the situation. Daniel spoke with the calm authority of someone who had rehearsed every word, every movement, for years. Tomorrow morning, 12 million people will wake up seeing the truth about your empire. Ms. Ashford. The world will know the lives you've cost, the corruption you've hidden, and the soldiers whose deaths line your pockets. You might try to fight this with lawyers, smear campaigns, or investigators, but everything has been anticipated. Every action you take is already being counted. You thought I was just a grieving boy, but I am the legacy of a general who prepared me for this moment since I was 6. Victoria felt a cold wave of terror wash over her. Every ounce of her wealth, her connections, and her influence was useless. In that moment, she realized that the boy before her, though 15, wielded a power far greater than she had ever imagined. He held her fate, her empire, and her secrets in the balance, and he was unflinching, unrelenting, and unstoppable. Daniel's voice softened slightly, almost to a whisper, carrying a weight of personal grief beneath its steel edge. You see, Ms. Ashford, this isn't about money or revenge. It's about justice. My father dedicated his life to serving this country, and you betrayed everything he stood for. Now, through the strategy he taught me, I will see that the truth prevails. Not in the courtroom, but in the hearts and minds of those who will hold you accountable. The choice is yours: restitution and acknowledgement of your crimes, or the world will learn everything, and nothing you have can stop it. Time is short, Ms. Ashford, and every second you delay only tightens the trap around you. Victoria swallowed hard, realizing that the carefully constructed web of power she had relied on her entire life was unraveling. Thread by thread, in the hands of a boy who was more than a child, he was the embodiment of strategy, justice, and legacy combined. The next morning, the world shifted. Headlines erupted across every news outlet, social media feeds, and financial platforms, declaring Victoria Ashford's empire in freefall. Stocks plummeted, allies distanced themselves, and whispers of corruption and murder spread like wildfire. Daniel Reeves, sitting quietly in his modest Brooklyn apartment, watched it all unfold across 3 monitors, his school uniform crisp despite the chaos he orchestrated. Beside him, Captain James Rodriguez and the team of former Special Forces veterans worked silently, ensuring every move Victoria made was anticipated and counted. Daniel's calm composure belied the storm he had unleashed. Every document, every email, every surveillance photo meticulously planned to hit at the heart of her empire. Victoria, once untouchable, found herself completely isolated. Her private investigators, her lawyers, her PR teams, all outmaneuvered by a 15-year-old boy. She had billions, yet in that moment, she was powerless, her empire crumbling like sand through her fingers. The reality hit her harder than any courtroom verdict ever could. She had underestimated not just a child, but a legacy forged by General Marcus Reeves, a man whose foresight and training extended far beyond his death. Daniel had transformed grief into a weapon, turning personal loss into an unstoppable force for justice. Every move Victoria tried to make to hide, to deflect, to manipulate, was anticipated. Every call she made, every strategy she executed, had already been countered before it could unfold. The realization was devastating. She had been playing chess against the master strategist while thinking she was moving against a frightened child. As Daniel stepped out into the bustling city streets, his backpack slung over one shoulder, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The boy who had entered La Renaissance 3 months ago as an unassuming student had now reshaped the destiny of a billionaire, revealed decades of corruption, and given voice to the countless lives harmed by greed. His eyes, cold and calculating, yet tinged with the pain of loss, scanned the city with quiet determination. This was only the beginning. Victoria's downfall was complete, but Daniel knew that true justice required vigilance. He would honor his father's legacy, not through vengeance alone, but by creating a foundation, a network, and a movement capable of dismantling corruption wherever it festered. And in that moment, the city, the nation, and the world began to understand one undeniable truth. Power does not come from money, influence, or fear. It comes from integrity, strategy, and those brave enough to wield it.